You're all good.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome this morning to Janome's Sewing Extravaganza online. Today, or this morning, first I'll introduce myself. I'm Melissa. I'm a sales educator for Janome Australia. So this morning we're going to go through a fair few of the feet that are patchwork and quilting related. So we have I have a selection of feet that we're going to show you, talk about, and then we will actually attach them to the machine. So the machine we're using this morning is the Continental M7. And as we are working through, you'll be able to see the stitching at the needle point, the screen, which you can see up in this top corner here, so that you can see what I'm doing exactly on screen as well. So I move this in. So these are a number of different feet that are available for the Janome machines. All of these particular feet do come standard with this CM7, but we have a number of different feet for different applications. So if I start down in the corner here, we have the clear sewing feet. I'll try and prop them up a little bit better for you. Move them back.
Yeah, no, where you had.
There we go. So we have the clear, which is the F foot, and we have the clear open toe, which is the F2 foot. So these ones here, we're going to show you some clasp stitching in a little bit. We then have two different versions of 1/4 inch foot. So this one here is the 1/4 inch with a guide. You can see just on the side there, there's a little black guide. And then we have the 1/4 inch foot without a guide. Okay, so we have the two different versions of that one. Then as we work around, we have the HP foot and the HP2 foot, plus the HP needle plate. Okay, so these three work together. Then we have the AccuFeed Flex foot, which is like a walking foot. Okay, so it has its own little feed dogs underneath here that work with the feed dogs on the machine, and you'll see that one working in a little bit. We then have, I'll move these into focus. All of these options right here are free motion feet. So I'll slide these out. So the most common probably that we would, that most people would be aware of are these four here. So the open toe spring-loaded foot and the open toe floating foot, and then the closed toe floating and the closed toe spring-loaded. So the spring-loaded feet bounce as they go across your work, and the floating feet clip onto the shank, clip onto the standard shank that comes with the machine, and they float over your work. So they're not actually going to move on you. All right. In addition to these ones, we then have two separate little floating feet. One, this one here, has a little opening in the middle, so you can do variable zigzag or zigzag quilting. It also then has radiating lines around, so you can do echo quilting. Then you have, oops, then you have the variable zigzag open toe foot. So there's nothing in front here. You can see exactly where your needle is going. And then lastly, we have the ruler work foot. So this one here attaches directly to the shank, has little walls so our rulers can attach against them. It has an opening on the front here so we can see where, if I bend it back, there we go. So you can see where your needle is going up and down in your fabric. And it also has markings inside of here. Probably not quite going to be able to see, but there's little tiny markings inside of here to show you exactly where your needle is going to land as well. All right. Then the last one I've got, which isn't a foot, it's a little bar, So this one here attaches into the shank, the standard shank, into the walking feet, so the AccuFeed and the HP2, and you can guide with this one. So we'll get started, and I'm going to work through these feet with you this morning. I'm just going to move all of these out of the way. Oh. Okay. So this morning, the first foot we're going to start with is the 1/4 inch without a guide. And I'm going to do some piecing. Just lay that out of the way. So I've got some little pieces here that I've prepared earlier. And
okay, so you've got a question. If there's no guide, how do you know where the 1/4 inch is?
Mm-hmm. So without the guide, I'm going to use the edge of the foot. So the difference with the two, if I try hold them maybe on that angle there.
Yep.
This little one here has the black metal guide, okay? So sometimes if you're new to patchwork, this little guide can be helpful, okay? Because you need something to help line you up. You do have, in addition to just the foot, you do have a number of markings on your needle plate, which I'm going to get to in just a second. But sometimes this guide isn't quite right for certain patchwork piecing techniques. So we now give you the option of the no guide. Okay, so with the guide, you, yes, can help you, but sometimes you don't want to rely too much on this and end up with too much of a bubble and then giving you quite an extreme 1/4 inch or over a 1/4 once stitched. So without the guide, if I try and hold this up in front of the screen, without the guide, you're literally then working,
Yeah, that's good.
do it backwards. You're literally then working on the edge of the fabric with the edge of your foot. Okay, so it's more of a visual without the guide than if it is with the guide. The other benefiting part of not having the guide is when you come to things such as intersections, which we're going to show you, you then don't have to worry so much about the intersection catching on the guide. It will move more freely over. Okay, so I'll show you that one in a second actually. I'll pop this one back on and I'll thread my machine because I did forget to do that. So I'll just take out my bobbin, pop in my next bobbin. And we don't need to draw the thread up on this one because we've got the easy set on the side here. So you notice I just trimmed the thread off. I'm done. I can then pop my thread on top of the machine and anyone that's had a Janome machine previously, this threading technique is very much the same amongst a lot of our machines. So it's not something new that you have to learn if you choose to upgrade your machines, and it's quite quick. As you saw, I just threaded the machine in a couple of seconds. So I'm going to set up so that my machine has a 1/4 inch stitch. Now I'm sewing on a 9mm machine at the moment. So if I left my needle where it is well over a 1/4 inch. It's probably a bit difficult to see on the screen you're looking at. So I am going to select my sewing applications on this machine. The sewing,
I like that.
what was this one?
I think. Yep.
So the sewing applications is this little t-shirt icon here. Now a number of our machines have this sewing applications. Depending on what machine you have, you may have more features in this section than others. So I'm going to select on this one Now on this machine, it's actually categorized them for me. So I've got sewing, I've got quilting, and I've got optional feet. So I'm going to go into this quilting tab that's here. And then my very first one that you can see over on the side is the patchwork piecing. So I'm going to select the patchwork piecing, and automatically, very quickly, my needle moved across to the 1/4 inch. My screen is then showing my needle drop is over at 8.3, which is 1/4 inch. And I'm also getting this option through the center here to piece lengths that can be memorized for multiple pieces. So if you are doing chain piecing or point-to-point piecing or anything like that where you are going to do the same length over and over, this function can be very helpful or useful. Now you'll see I've got 3 different options here depending again on what you're doing. So I'm just going to chain piece at the minute. So I'm going to leave it on 1/4, just straight stitch, but you can get it to do reverses at the start and end, and you can also get it to do lock off. So I'll explain after I show you this one. Okay, I'll pop back to this screen. So I've left my screen as is, and you can still see that. Now, I'll just grab my needle plate here and show you. Here we go, the light's on that. So I'm not just guessing where to put my fabric on here. I can use this line here that you can see on your needle plate. This one here is your needle drop. So I'm actually lining my piece of fabric under here up with that line, so I can just see the line here, right? So I'm just going to line my fabric up with that. And also down the front, down here, I've got a little marking that's then my 1/4 inch as well. So I can see down at this point here, I can see the 1/4 inch marking, and I can see that the guide's on the edge of my fabric. So when I then drop my foot down, oops, if I don't move everything as I do that, I drop my foot down, I'm then ready to sew. Now, if you watch the little screen up in the top corner, this will pop up with a little message. And when I get to the end, I will show you what we're going to do with that little message. So I'm just going to sew this length. It's only 4 inches, so it won't take too long. And my machine's set quite slow. So once I reach the end of my seam, I'm at the end there now. On my screen, it now asks me whether I like to do the same size or a different size. So if I'm doing a lot of this same work, which I've got 3 or 4 here, I will click OK. If I was doing a lot of just random different pieces, I don't necessarily need that, so I would click different size. For this one, I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to trim and grab another little pair, pop them together. I'm going to line back up again with my line here and my marking here. Oops. And I'm going to sew my length again. Now on my screen, it will ask me again at the end of my seam. So that's reached the end of my seam. And if I flick back here, it's asked, would I like to continue or change it to a different size? So for each multiple, I can just keep going through, and it's only going to sew the length of my stitch. Okay. When I'm then ready to go and add my next section, I'm going to select different size on my screen. And therefore, when I come to sewing this length, it's not going to stop part way down because it's remembering this length. It's going to sew from here to here, and then I can continue to sew all my blocks together. So I'll show you this now. And I've attached the no guide, and I've got my join running through here. So I'm just going to line that up, again using the line marking on my needle plate and the line marking on my needle plate. And another great thing to do is when you start, we don't need to necessarily pull up our bobbin thread, but if you hold your top thread out to an, is this angle?
To the
Horizontal? Is this horizontal? Yeah.
at right angles.
Okay, at right angles. Thank you.
2 foot.
So here and here to your foot, this will help when your stitch starts to collect that bottom thread and sew a perfect line. So I'm just going to select on my screen for a different size so it doesn't get partway down and stop. And I'm going to hold that little thread. So I'm holding it at, if I'm looking at the machine, about 9 o'clock. Sometimes I might hold it out at 3 o'clock as well. Just depends on what I'm actually sewing. For piecing, I tend to hold it out on this side because I'm holding my pieces anyway. Now with the Janome machines as well, you have the little feed dogs underneath that are feeding the fabric for you. So you don't need to pull or push at your fabric. I'm literally just helping to guide that nice and straight, and I'm allowing that to just pull through the machine on its own. I'm not allowing it to force through or anything. Again, when I get to the end of this seam, I stop. On my screen, which you can see up in that corner, it's asking me the same size again, so I can click OK. I'm going to trim my thread with my scissor and remove, and there's my little block. Whoops, off screen. There's my little block. Okay, so I can keep going and doing those. So I would have sewn together all of these sections first, and then I can come back and add these sections in. Okay. All right. So the other piecing foot that we have, oops. The other piecing foot that we have that is new or fairly new, probably not, depending on when you have recently looked at the new Janomes, is the HP needle plate and HP foot. So this one will look more like a industrial foot, and it allows the machine to work in a slightly more industrial fashion. So I'm just going to lock my machine to remove my needle plate. So I don't have any screws on this one. I've just pressed one button on my screen, take that needle plate off and pop my new needle plate on. All right. Now I am going to change my foot. Oops. Now this foot, while I don't have any foot on there, this foot is going to work with this one long feed dog on this left-hand side, this one in the middle at the back, and this one in the middle at the front. All right, so it's not going to work on the entire feed dog. So therefore you only have this much contact. So it can become quite a lot more accurate as you're piecing. Again, depending on, we have so many different options for piecing so that you can work with what you are. You might need to use this one for one particular application, and then you might need to use your one with a guide for a different application. Okay, so we've got a lot of different ones for different uses and also personal preference. So again, I'm going to take my two little pieces. Now this particular foot, as with all of our 1/4 inch feet as well, where I was talking earlier about the needle plate marking down here and along the front here, the 1/4 inch feet also have little markings on the actual foot. So you can see it kind of looks like a bit of a shadow just here, and just here in front is a 1/4 inch in front of your needle drop position. And then just at the back here, there's a slight little marking for a 1/4 inch beyond. So if we needed to start a 1/4 inch in, we can go to the 1/4 inch marking beyond on our needle plate, the 1/4 inch marking on the foot beyond our needle drop, and therefore it's going to start a 1/4 inch in. So if we were doing something such as these little baby's blocks, where we're not actually stitching through, we don't want to stitch through this point, we want to stop before we get to this point, we can use the markings on our foot as well as that point to point and get that to line up in the exact position. So we'll pop this one down. Now this one again doesn't have a guide on this right hand side of the foot. This one you're using just with your eye, making sure that it lines up. But you do have a 1/4 inch on the right and a 1/4 inch on the left. So you could choose, if you were needing to do something with the 1/4 on this side, you could use it this way, or you could use it this way. All right. So I'm going to pop, oh, my machine was warning me to make sure I've got the correct needle plate. So I'm going to pop my foot down and I'm going to start to sew. Now you'll notice on my screen up here, because I've changed my needle plate, it's telling me now I need to change to the HP foot, which I have, and it's only allowed me to do the stitches that will work with this foot. So any of the new machines that don't have a screw-on needle plate, that are like this machine or the push-down needle plates, they will all recognize what needle plate you have on your machine and only allow you to use what is available for that. Okay, so you might be able to see here. Let me move backwards. I'm going to turn over. Maybe that's going to give us a better. Can you see there? It's just got the 1/4 inch stitch down that side. So then I can go ahead and press that open and I've got a perfect 1/4 inch. Okay. So this one is an excellent little one as well. I've just recently been using it for piecing as you go. And working with that. Now this one has also got a walking foot version. That's this little guy here. So this one here then allows you to do quilting. Now this foot, I'll give you a little bit of a rundown. This one here attaches into a little block that sits on the back of the machine where you can see my finger wobbling. So this little block then connects to the shaft that goes the whole way through the machine and links up with these lower feed dogs. So you get complete accuracy with your quilting every time. So I'm jumping across to this foot because it works with this needle plate. Once I then change back to my other needle plate, we'll go back to the other floating feet and the other walking foot. But I'm going to grab my, just a quilt sandwich that I've popped together. And you can see here, so it's only narrow. You can also see it's only got a straight line down the center of it. All right. And I can work with my little foot. I'll try and go out here actually. I'm going to start, this one's got my marking. So I'm going to start right on this joined edge here. And I'm going to stitch down this line. So I'm going to use the edge of my seamed border. And for this one, I'm going to draw up my thread. So I'm just going to hold my bottom thread, drop my needle and draw up the bottom. You don't necessarily have to. I do a lot of long arm quilting, so it's just kind of embedded in my brain to do that. And we're going to start to quilt. I'm going to select my tie off. So we'll do a little tie off before it starts. And it's just feeding that through. Now I can sew at full speed with this little foot. Hopefully you can still hear me talking. Okay. I don't have any pins in this because I've spray basted it as well. But this little walking foot, the little teeth that are in here, that is feeding this layers through with the bottom. So I'm not pulling, I'm not holding it back. I'm just letting it feed through and I'm just keeping it straight. I'm not allowing it to wobble. Okay. And then when I get this line back to one more stitch, I'm going to lock off again. So your lock off button on your machines looks a bit like a little bullseye. Okay, and you can see there, can you see that? Yep. it's just sewn that little quilting line the whole way down. Okay. So you could do on the white and triangle one. I'll change over to my camera. This little quilt here, the straight lines you can see in there, you can do quilting like that with this little foot. So we've just lined up, we stitched one line, lined up the previous line. So you can see in the pinwheel kind of area, the white pinwheels with the straight sections. You can line up and just add each row using the edges of your foot rather than having to line it all up. Okay, so just a little idea for you. Thank you, Peter. All right, so now let's pop back to some other quilting options.
Have you got a different coloured thread?
Yes, I'm going to change over to it.
Okay. There's just been some requests for a contrast.
Sure. I didn't have a bobbin in the pink. Okay. So I'm going to pop on my F2 foot and we're going to do some clasp stitching, some clasp quilting. And pop in a extremely contrasty thread. And we'll reset. So with your clasp quilting, I'll get Peter to hold up for me the red and white one. So in the white corner sections, if he brings one of them closer a little bit, yep, that's it. So in these white corners, these are clasp stitches. So if you are only wanting to grab at the at particular sections, you don't necessarily want to quilt up everything. These little ones are great to use, little stitches, and just drop one in at a time to an area. So you can see in that white area on left of screen, that is one of them. And we literally just drop them in wherever suitable until you're happy. So sometimes you might choose to do them in the cross sections of a pieced quilt, or you might choose to do them in a block. Sometimes they used to do this kind of quilting with standard sewing or embroidery thread and tie them off. So it's a similar kind of technique. Let's change back to this little one. So again, in your machine, I'm going to go into my sewing applications and pick it up from my quilting because this machine groups them all together. So let me go, there we go. So I've gone into my sewing applications, into quilting and the clasp stitches. If your machine doesn't have the clasp stitches as a section, your machine may have some of or one of the following. So they're little star stitches, sometimes the snowflakes, diamonds, or what looks similar to an eyelet. So for today, I'm just going to pick up this star one, and I'm going to just, I've got my, it's suggesting my F foot on the screen. I like to use my F2 just so I can see. It's still going to hold the fabric down, but I can see a bit better. So I'll change back to camera 3.
Question whether this is available for the S7?
Yes.
I'm assuming the clasp.
Oh, the clasp, yes, yeah. In the S7, definitely your sewing applications does give you, under quilting, you'll have the option for clasp stitching. Okay. So I'm going to work in this little square here. And I'm just going to start. So on my screen, it's popped up. You can just see one little stitch at the very top here. So I'm just going to drop my foot and allow it to start to stitch the design. And once it's completed, I can move on to my next section. I'll grab that thread and try and keep out of the way. This one around. So again, this is also, if you have something that's like a large quilt and you can't move the whole thing through, sometimes this style of quilting can be helpful for you. You can focus on one little area and you can just move it around until you're happy with how much quilting's in that section. So I'll do one more after this one and then I'll hold it a bit closer to the camera. Okay, let me trim away these to make it look neater. Oops. And you can see there, I've just picked up a couple of different sections and quilted that through. And it's come through onto the back with my little stitching. Okay, so that's your clasp stitching. Again, you can do that with the F or the F2. We then, just having a look in my little basket. I will pop on I'm going to pop on here my floating closed toe foot. Now you have the option of the close or the open in this little style of foot. They're the exact same, that they attach in the exact same way. However, the open toe, if you have markings, you can see your markings. Sorry, did I say close and pointed at the open?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so sorry, I meant the open toe, you can see your markings. The closed toe, you're not going to see in front of the foot because there's a little bit of plastic, but it is going to hold down your layers. So if you have something with maybe a bit of applique on there, that's going to hold down your fabric and you're not going to end up with movement. Now these little feet do attach in a slightly different fashion in that they clip on at the back of the foot and then they come down and clip on at the front. So the foot doesn't actually wobble, it's stationary. All right. It's a little bit hard to see, that's okay. So on my machine screen now, I am going to select the free motion option. Now on this particular machine, it is automatically going to drop my feed dogs for me, but you may have a setting on the end of your machine, down the front or the back of your machine to lower your feed dogs, okay? If you have a smaller machine, you may then need to use a little plate. So we do have a number of different options. This one's the one I'm going to show for the minute. So I've just changed over to straight stitch number 2 on this machine, which again is just a straight stitch. And I have the QO foot. So it's showing me up top here. I can use the open toe or the closed toe. So I have the O. No, C.
C.
Oh, I get these two confused so often. Same. I just look at what I'm doing.
Yep.
Now, I am going to, before I do this, I'm going to change my needle plate again. I change my needle plate so often on these machines because it's so easy. So just take off, pop the new one on. My machine makes sure that I've got the right foot and I'm happy with it. Now I've changed to my straight stitch needle plate so that I've got a lot more accuracy. With the straight stitch needle plates, they have single holes, so therefore my thread can't move. And as I'm then stitching, I'm a little bit more, or my needle, my thread, my foot are a lot more supported, okay? So that's why you'll notice a lot of the machines now have the straight stitch needle plate as an option. And you'll also notice, if I quickly flick back to this screen, it's now dropped out the 2 zigzag options that I did have, and it's only left me with the straight. All right. So we will pop my thread under my foot, and I'm just going to hold my thread again to begin with. I generally tend to hold it with my left hand. You could drag your thread up if you would like. Just move my foot control. Now you do have a couple of other options with your free motion. Sometimes you may like to be a foot control person. I personally don't free motion with a foot control. Again, personal preference. I choose to use the start stop button on the front of the machine. So a lot of the machines now will have the start stop, and I tend to use this one so that I can set the speed of my machine. And I'm now trying to think then about my hands, working with the speed of the machine, working with my foot being more regular. I can just press start, my machine will set to its speed, and then I start stitching. The only thing I'm then worrying about is where my hands are going and what movements I'm making. I'm then able to very easily flick my hand up and press my stop button to stop the machine from sewing. So I'm going to do that. So I've got my machine set at about mid-speed. Again, this is another personal preference thing. You might prefer to have a flat out machine or a slower machine. As long as your hands are set, or your hands are working to the speed that you prefer, you'll get the best motions for the stitching. So I'm going to start. This one's automatically going to drop my foot. And then I'm just going to start moving my fabric. So I actually have like a little kind of a swirl on my fabric that I'm kind of mimicking a little bit. And then it's just a matter of moving. So with the free motion, it does mean you're completely in control. And you're lucky you're not looking at my face, because I do all different kind of facial expressions when I free motion. Now you'll also notice just as I came to the end, I held my start button and the machine slowed right down. So I've got it so that I'm stopped right on the very edge of my join here. You could get it into a corner or something like that. But rather than just stopping your machine immediately, if you hold in your start button, either when you start or when you finish, when you hold that button in, your machine will slow down to the minimal stitches per minute before it then speeds up to speed if you do it at the start, or before it slows down and stops at the end. Okay, it doesn't matter whether you're free motioning or whether you're using decorative stitch, or no matter what you're doing, that function applies to all of the above. Okay, you also, with your free motion, to tie off, because we don't have like a reverse option or anything, there's no contact, you can just hold stationary in that position, or you can bring up your threads. So I'm just going to lift my foot and fabric, grab my thread, come back to roughly where my point was, drop my needle back down and pull my bobbin thread through. So you can see there now I've got my bobbin thread with my top thread. So now I can tie those off if I chose to. Let's pull a bit more bobbin. So then you could bed those back in if you wanted to. You can trim them off, whichever you'd like. So let me just hold that up. There we go. Okay, so I'm set roughly at medium speed, and my stitches, it is a variegated thread, so my stitches are all roughly the same size. Okay.
Can you turn the machine lights off?
Sure.
Just a little bit of contrast.
Okay.
Yep.
Just that one?
That's good.
Okay.
That'll stop the contrast.
We had a request to turn the machine lights off.
So they'll show up better now, the stitches for people.
Okay, excellent. I'll try and do it on this one next.
Okay.
Okay. So that is your free motion. I'm then going to use, now you've got two feet that you can choose to use for the variable zigzag. So we have the QV and the QZ. So these two both allow you to do variable zigzag. I'm going to change my needle plate back again. So this one, if I grab, Peter grabs that red sample again for me. In all of the red sections are different ideas for the variable zigzag. So what variable zigzag means is as you are actually sewing, you're going to apply pressure to your knee lift, which plugs into the machine. And as you apply pressure or you stop applying pressure, the stitch will start to increase in width and decrease in width. Okay. So I'm going to go in on my screen into the option that says variable zigzag. Again, those that have the sewing applications on machines such as the 12,000, the 15,000, the S7, the S9, and so forth, 9450, 94, you'll have this option. So you have it in two different methods. You can use it with your F foot so that there's complete contact with your fabric, or you can use it with your free motion feet. So the 2 feet that I was showing you. And I'm just going to have to shimmy my machine forward a fraction. And
Yeah. Good.
so I'm going to pop on this variable zigzag foot, the open toe one, so that you can see. And we'll stitch into a grey little area. So I am going to, as I am stitching, I'm going to press against my knee lift. So again, I'm going to use my start stop button simply because I prefer to use my hand on my knee lift. So you can see down here in the bottom corner, my knee lift is attached in, and I use my knee lift. Sometimes on your knee lifts, if your knees aren't quite long enough, you might choose to use a pull noodle on that knee lift so that it gives a bit more area and it comes across closer to your leg. I personally, for variable zigzag, use my hand. So as I'm stitching, I'm going to need to press on my knee lift. The further to the right, the wider it goes, the further, or the less to the left I push, the less width I'm going to get. Okay, feels strange sewing without a light. Can I put my bobbin in? So again, my foot doesn't wobble, my foot's stationary, it's hovering, and we're going to start sewing. Now I haven't pressed on my knee lift, so it's not going to start zigzagging. So we'll just start sewing. And then as I'm moving, you see there. Hopefully that's
That looks good.
Can you see it on screen?
Yep.
So I've just done a random little line. I'm sitting on a funny angle, so I'm trying to sew. So I've just had wide zigzags, narrow zigzags, wide zigzags. So you could use something like this. It can be as imaginative as you like. You could use it to do, like on the little red, black and white quilt. You could use it to add texture to art quilts or appliques. Looks great as little reeds. Just gives a little bit extra to your stitching rather than just standard free motion. Okay. And I'll show you the all right, so now the last one that I'm going to show you, I put my screwdriver. I moved two things and now I can't find my screwdriver. Oh, there it is. And, yeah. So this last one that I'm going to show you is the walking foot or the AccuFeed Flex system foot. So it looks quite large, okay. A standard walking foot will also look quite large. Looks something more like this one, but this one works on your needle timing. So it has a little bar that sits up above your needle bar, and as your needle goes down, this is how this foot then knows to move the fabric through. So a number of the newer quilting models and computerized sewing models will have a foot similar to this one, where these lower feed dogs then work with the feed dogs on the bottom of the machine and move the whole lot through at the same time. So I'm just loosening the screw. I don't need to take the screw completely out for this. I just loosen my screw off. I connect my little hook into the back of the block on the machine. And if you're not 100% sure what I mean, head into your local store and they can show you exactly what this section is. It's a little bit difficult to get the camera back to there. So then I can, and I'm going to do, a little bit of movement with this foot. So rather than just a straight single line, I am going to go into my quilting again on the screen. This time I'm going to select my straight sewing and I'm going to go into my edit and I'm going to adjust the foot pressure. Some of your machines, your foot pressure might be on top, but this one is on the actual screen. So I'm going to loosen that foot pressure off. That is how heavy this little foot is pushing down on my fabric. So what I want to be able to do is as I'm sewing, I'm just gently going to move the quilt left and right to get a slight wave rather than an exact straight line. So if you are not a preferred straight line quilter, you could use this style of technique to do your quilting without being perfectly straight every time. Oh, let me just plug my foot control back in. I'm going to connect in my AccuFeed on my screen. And then you'll notice these little feet, if you watch these little feet here as I sew, they will start to move and they are picking up the fabric and feeding the fabric through. Oops. Alright, so I'm just gently, I've got my other hand over here, gently moving that. Again, I'm not forcing the fabric, I'm allowing the foot to move the fabric through. I'm just being a little bit suggestive on where I want the foot to move. Okay, so trim off once I'm to this side. And you can see this wavy line that we've now created. So I could go again and do a secondary. Now this foot also does have a number of other little soles that you can attach to the foot. So you can do ditch quilting with this one. You can get a 1/4 inch version if you like to attach bindings with your walking foot. You can get a straight sewing, and you can get a open toe. All get attached onto this little section here, and just interchangeable. So this little part pulls off. A little bit more, stuff like that. And this part can be changed. So you don't need to have several of this section. It's just a couple of different ones of these if you choose. Okay. Any questions?
No, all good.
All right. So a couple of other, those of you that don't have this exact machine, but maybe have, if I push these all back a little bit further, some of these style of feet are things that you will find in your local Janome store, as well as all the feet that we have worked through today. Where'd the other one go? Oh, yeah. Dropped them on the floor. So a lot of these style of feet, plus all of the feet that we've gone through today, are all available at your local retailer. And you can then head in. They can show you how to use any of the ones we've gone through today. They can show you how to use any of these additional feet that you might not yet have, as well as, yeah, a lot of these different techniques. So thank you everyone for coming. Oh, let's change back to, there we go. Thank you everyone for coming to session 1. We look forward to seeing you again in the next sessions over the next 3 days if you're coming back. There are some project notes for this little quilt that goes through a lot of the techniques that we have been through. So this little quilt, you can head to your, or contact your local Janome stockist, whoever invited you to the event, and they will be able to give you all of the notes from today, the little project to do with this one. Brilliant, thank you. And all from this afternoon, I think that they should have those.
Yep, they'll have them this afternoon.
Yeah, so just head, contact them, either email, phone. If you are able to go into their store, head in there, and they'll be able to give you all of that. And if not, have a great day, and thank you from Janome Australia.